Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Costain. Planton Farm is embarking on a pioneering project to explore the practicalities and sustainability of dual-purpose pasture-raised poultry as an integrated enterprise for UK farms. I spoke to Planton co-founder Rayner and I asked her why dual-purpose poultry is important.
So we've got lots of kind of ethical issues really around culling male chicks and the kind of, well, the wastage of life, I guess people perceive, but also the, I guess, wastage within the system. So yeah, so dual purpose birds, essentially, we think that they've got a kind of much more likely to be more robust. So currently we've got very distinct breeds for kind of eggs and chicken. And they also have a lot of issues associated because they are putting down a lot of energy into producing eggs and chicken. Whereas a kind of more middle dual purpose type bird, we're likely to see fewer problems such as kind of welfare issues or mortality and things like that. So yeah, the dual purpose bird also is probably going to be much more appropriate for kind of a pasture kind of low input system. So that's why we're really focusing on dual purpose within Impeccable Poultry project.
So there are going to be welfare benefits, and then because you're using the same bird for meat and for eggs, that means you'll be getting double the output for the same environmental input.
Yeah, exactly that. So I guess a lot of it has been focused really on the kind of making use of the males within an egg system. So over in Europe, there's been some bans on male chick culling, and so people have turned to more dual purpose birds to give some value to that male bird. But I guess what we're trying to do is take a bit more of a balanced approach and actually look at the kind of what is the value with the male as much as the kind of female. So it's not just a kind of how can we make use of males. It's about kind of actually there's value in that male, and it's actually quite a really distinctly different product to the current chicken that we're eating.
Why aren't chickens dual purpose at the moment?
So yeah, as I say, we've kind of gone down this line of separating out the genetics. And then because of that, we've really focused on kind of productive output, and we've done that across all of our farming and not really considered all the kind of inputs that are required in order to get that output. But actually, if we look at kind of more holistically and across the kind of all the requirements in order to get to that output, you end up well, you need to kind of, yeah, you ultimately need to reconsider what productivity really means. So we're obviously getting eggs, we're getting chicken, but it's requiring a lot of kind of externalized costs. And essentially kind of dual purpose, we're hoping that it's going to require fewer externalized costs in order to get probably a reduced and almost definitely a reduced kind of productive output in terms of how we currently consider productivity. So dual purpose birds at the moment, kind of egg ranges seem to be around kind of 200 or even less eggs per year, whereas in kind of a commercial industrialized system, we end up with around 320. So it's lots less eggs. And then obviously the meat is going to be quite a different kind of it's going to be put across the bird a bit differently. So they have bigger legs and smaller breast meat. So yeah, it's really going to change how we kind of perceive that productive output. And at the moment, yeah, we just need to move right away from that, I think.
Now, we're talking about regenerative chicken here, but how does regenerative chicken farming differ from other higher quality systems, for example, free range and organic?
So I think like regenerative agriculture generally is about kind of regeneration across a lot of different components. So we need to kind of regenerate our relationship with food and where that food's coming from. So yeah, I think it goes beyond some of the kind of pasture poultry, which there's some really brilliant guys out there doing some really good things and that are definitely so much better. But actually, let's take a step completely back and start to really consider things like the feed, because a lot of poultry now is still requires quite a high kind of soy input or grain input and things like that ultimately in the wild, obviously chickens would be kind of accessing seeds and insects and things like that. So we need to create an environment that provides some of that nutritional input. And then when we can't necessarily provide all of that, we're going to need to look at kind of waste food streams and things like that that go beyond just the kind of just kind of slightly better agriculture.
So you've talked about feed there, but what other particular areas will your research focus on?
Yeah, so feed is a key one, and then breed is really key to us. So there are kind of a variety of chickens available really globally, but also in the UK. And we want to kind of explore the most kind of appropriate chickens for the system. And I think part of that is going to be around their productive output. And I guess, as I was saying earlier, kind of focusing a bit more on that meat side. So although we want them to produce eggs, actually, I think we're potentially coming at it from a slightly more meat angle, because I think that's quite a unique point. Like it's really hard to purchase a dual purpose male cockerel in the UK currently. I think that's quite a unique point, I guess, for the project. And then we're also looking at the kind of housing and how chickens can be practically applied onto a variety of farms. So there's our own kind of context, which is around portable chicken sheds that can move around the farm, can be integrated into the kind of cattle systems too, but recognizing that might not be perfect for everybody else. Other people might want a more of a kind of static system. So then how can you make sure that you're not overloading the soil? How can you make sure that they get fresh range and pasture access too? So yeah, the three kind of key areas of the DEFRA project is around the breed, the feed, and then the housing and practical application.
Do you expect that the system you're working on will be integrated within a farm that's producing many products, or could it also be used on a farm that's simply producing poultry?
Yeah, so I think at the moment we've kind of gone down this specialization of poultry farms and then others. And actually, what we are looking really to do is how can we bring poultry back into other farming environments. Um, and I think it's really never going to be a kind of one size fits all. And I think that's quite a challenge, is that it's going to have to adapt, obviously, to the requirements of that farm. So, for example, a farm that wants to integrate poultry into an arable enterprise, obviously that's going to look very different to potentially one that has a bit more of a focus on the poultry and maybe want to have it in a more of a static environment and potentially produce more. So I think it's about creating that kind of adaptable system that potentially can fit across a variety of farming environments.
Annie, you talked about robustness, but what sort of characteristics are they that make a robust chicken?
So current kind of broiler chicken meat production has quite high mortality. In fact, we're kind of planning that in. So most operations will plan for almost 5% of the birds to die before they get to processing. So that's quite a key point to a bird that doesn't die. So has a bit more of that kind of robustness against the environment and such. I think also, obviously, chickens are from kind of Asia. They're meant for quite a warm environment. So one that is essentially adaptable to the UK environment. Obviously, we've got the challenges of bird flu and such. And we want to be introducing diversity really so into the chicken production system. So we farm very few breeds of chickens really in the UK and globally. And in chicken meat production is really one of two, is 90% of our global chicken production, which is quite wild. So how can we bring in a bit more diversity, because diversity is key in terms of kind of that kind of immune response, but also the kind of physiological, how can they kind of make sure that they put feathers down and do all of these things that means that they're appropriate for the UK quite cold, windy environments sometimes.
And in terms of behaviour, how important is epigenetics? Are you going to be looking at ways of building in genetic memory, for example, to improve foraging abilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that foraging component we will probably find in more of the kind of traditional breeds that have obviously been selected over the years within a kind of pasture type environment. So very much the laying hens, particularly, a lot of them are actually selected within a caged environment, because the global population of hens are typically in cages. So yeah, what we're looking to do is definitely look to some of those more traditional breeds, or ones that have been selected specifically within a pasture environment. So there's a really great genetics company over in Germany who have actually been doing that for many years. So we really kind of hope we can get to work with the likes of them through the project. Yeah. And then I think also what would be really interesting, which is a bit beyond our kind of immediate project, is looking at kind of that maternal memory or knowledge and how that can be passed down. Because obviously we've taken eggs and we incubate them and they have no contact really with their mothers. But we know with cows and such that there's so much knowledge, and any other species really, is passed down through that maternal behaviour. So it would be really exciting to start to explore kind of chickens rearing their own young, and then that would be passed down throughout a kind of farming system as well, particularly in that kind of pasture situation.
Now, just finally, your goal is to create a practical, scalable model for regenerative dual-purpose chicken. What are the key supply chain barriers?
Yeah, so I think whilst we're growing it, we've lost so much of the infrastructure around kind of smaller production. So that's going to be a real key challenge. So things like abattoirs and such, obviously processing units, there's very few that will process smaller numbers of birds. So that's going to be quite a key challenge. So obviously we want to kind of tap into some of the work that's going on around bringing back some of those smaller abattoirs. I think also the fact that actually it's really going to be the system's going to be different on every farm. So it's not going to be a one size fits all. So how can we create a system or an infrastructure around that actually allows for that variety and celebrates that variety? Because that's really what regenerative agriculture is about, is that variation and that kind of context specific farming. So yeah, that's going to be definitely a challenge in its own right, but also not a bad one at all.
That was Annie Rayner from Planton Farm. More news as ever on our website 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.